the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast with your host, Jackie Pilosoff.
No one should have to go through a divorce feeling alone and isolated. The Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast is a production of Divorced Girl Smiling, where every show is 30 minutes aimed to empower you, help you feel validated and understood, and connect you with some of the best divorce professionals in the industry. So grab a cup of coffee or a glass of wine and start smiling as you join us right now for the Divorced Girl Smiling Podcast. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always at divorcedgirlsmiling.com. Before we get started, I want to say something about the day your divorce is finalized. Among other emotions, it's a huge relief. I mean, at least it was for me. But what I didn't realize is that there is a to-do list that comes with a divorce being finalized. There's a checklist of things that have to be done, and one of those things is getting a new will and trust. I cannot stress enough how important that is, and the process should be started no more than a few weeks after your divorce is final. If you live in Illinois and you want to talk to someone about this who can do your will and estate, talk to Emily Wadowski. I love Emily. She's been doing this for over 10 years. And what's so nice about a will and estate planning attorney is you don't pay them by the hour. It's a flat fee, and you can ask Emily all the questions you want, take all the time you want, and she will put your will and estate together so you don't have to worry about it. If you want to learn more about Emily, you can find her at emilyroslaw.com. I also want to tell you about a wonderful divorce attorney in New York named Catherine Miller. And Catherine is the founder of her practice, Miller Law Group. I've known Catherine since 2020. And she is so wonderful. She does not litigate anymore. All of her cases are done through mediation, and can't even say enough about her. Just love her. If you want to learn more about Catherine, you can find her at miller-law.com, and you can find both Emily and Catherine in the Trusted Professional section of Divorced Girl Smiling. When people get divorced, oftentimes there's many scenarios where one of the parents will say to the other, I don't want you drinking around the kids. In some cases, the parent might say, okay, no big deal, I won't do it. In other cases, they're like, you know what, I can do whatever I want, I'm going to do it. And every situation is different. But today, what we're going to talk about is the difference between sobriety and recovery. Because a lot of times when people are asked not to drink, they don't have control over it and they can't stop. So I want to try to educate everybody today. I have a great guest for this. My guest is Chris Beck. He's a vice president at SoberLink. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks again for having me on your show. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for being here. And I think this is such an important topic because people getting divorced, of course, everybody, we want our children to be safe, and they might not realize that their ex might have tried to stop and just can't. So I think this is going to be a really important conversation.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm ready to help educate your audience out there, and anything I can do to help that process.
Okay, so Chris, I read the article that you wrote for Divorce Girl Smiling, and you talk about sobriety and recovery, and then you talk about alcohol use disorder, AUD. And you say for people who have AUD, sudden sobriety may not be a possibility without potential physical dangers. So is AUD the same as being an alcoholic? Is that what that is?
Yeah, so the DSM has 3 different criteriums for defining someone that has a core relationship with alcohol, and depending on the severity, what level of severity that is, whether it be moderate, maybe severe, or a low type issue with it. But the DSM has 11 different criteriums, and if they meet so many of them, that is how it's kind of defines. And I'm not a psychologist. I'm not someone that does that type of thing. So I'm just speaking off the cuff, but there is a clear diagnosis that you can get. And those people with alcohol use disorder, that is something that is different than just I'm going out with my friends. I might have a few too many to drink, and then 3 weeks go by and they never have another drink. Someone that has alcohol use disorder, there is things that are happening that, regardless of the consequences, they're trying to find their next drink.
Okay, now, Chris, first of all, what's DSM stand for?
So that's a diagnostic tool used by psychologists to define mental health and mental health
Okay.
criteria.
So, for those of you who don't know, Chris Beck works for SoberLink, and SoberLink is an alcohol monitoring device to help people know that their parent, who their kid is with, is sober. So, the person blows into the device, you get results immediately, and you know that your kids are safe. So, that's his background. But while SoberLink is an amazing tool and can be used for so many different scenarios, it really isn't going to help. Tell me if you agree with me, Chris, if somebody can't stop drinking because they, that's not the way to use SoberLink.
Sure. No, we always suggest that you know, you be evaluated by an addiction professional before you get started on a system like SoberLink. I mean, if you have something that's a little bit more severe than just maybe a hearsay case of, hey, I think my husband or my wife might be drinking too much. But if you have, clear evidence, probably something like multiple DUIs, and they've been in treatment in the past, maybe they have to go back to treatment. These are things that we need to understand and know. SoberLink is just a way to hold someone a little bit accountable for their sobriety, and it's not anecdotal anymore. It's something that is evidence based, to where you know exactly what the person is at the time they submit a test as far as their blood alcohol concentration level. So, yeah, like you mentioned earlier, you can know in real time if your parent is, your co parent is parenting safely. And that's really what we're after. They could be in what's called recovery, and where they're going through the process of healing. And this technology, like SoberLink, is helping them through that, you know. So that's really where we want to see it.
All right. So it sounds like it has to be done, things have to be done in an order. So if you're listening to this and you're not sure if your ex has a problem, and you're thinking maybe he can't stop, then according to Chris, you tell your lawyer he needs to be evaluated. And after the evaluation, you take steps. And then, like Chris said, you can use SoberLink while the person's recovering, and that will help them stay accountable to themselves, but they also have to get all this other help in addition to using SoberLink. So, what in this article you wrote that there are risks of immediate cessation of drinking. So, if somebody was ordered to stop drinking and they have alcohol use disorder, it says abrupt cessation can lead to withdrawal symptoms such as seizure, delirium, tremens, or even death. This was by Dr. Alan Gordon, an addiction psychiatrist with over 30 years of experience, says this. So, what do you do? Do you tell your lawyer? Do you say, I'm not really sure what's the process?
So yeah, I mean, that just goes back to having that evaluation done in the very forefront. If you have a severe case of someone has a severe case of alcohol use disorder, that means they're drinking all the time and they're just trying to get sober. Let's not think about the recovery process yet. We just need to get this person sober so they just start thinking clearly again. And I think Dr. Gordon talks about this as being a process of stabilizing the individual, getting them back to where they can make good decisions going forward, to then, assist with that parenting plan and get it into a good place. So, to actually stop drinking is really what he's saying. We need to get that person to stop drinking, but we need to do it in a clinical setting where possible clinical detox is the best means for that. And sometimes that can be going to a hospital and clinically detoxing with doctors, or even, just going to see your local your local pediatrician, your local doctor, excuse me, to find out, what are the next steps.
So, according to the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, 10.5% of children live with a parent who misuses alcohol. That is the most frightening statistic I might have ever read. So, like over 1 in 10 children are living with a parent who misuses alcohol. So, does that mean they're all alcoholics, or is it a mix of they're alcoholics or the person just drinks too much and they can stop?
Yeah, so I think this stat actually states that, 10% of those kiddos are living with a parent that has alcohol use disorder. So they're abusing alcohol in a way that can potentially harm those kiddos if they're left alone, right? I mean, if it's a severe case, that could potentially be the case. So if you talk about some of the um, I guess, binge drinking or things that might not be as daily. Maybe it's a monthly, or maybe it's on a lower scale of abuse when they're drinking their alcohol. This number could be a lot higher. And I think that's what's interesting about SoberLink is that it can actually help at the front end too. If we're not sure where to start, SoberLink might just be a great starting point, because let's find out, how severe this problem is, and if this person can go, a few months with using our system and show sober test after test after test in a way, and then that might help with any accusations of, misuse of alcohol. But, if you see positives come up over that length of time, then we know, okay, we need to do a little bit more. We need to do more investigation.
That's such a great point. You can really use it because if somebody truly doesn't have AUD, they're able to quit drinking. And if they can't, maybe that wakes them up to say, oh, maybe there's a bigger issue here that I need to get help with. Certainly wakes the other parent up. And it's so beneficial for the kids. We have to take a break. You're listening to the Divorce Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And today I am here with Chris Beck from SoberLink. And Chris and I are talking about the difference between sobriety and recovery. After the break, we're going to get into the role of detox and support systems. We're going to talk about how SoberLink can help, but we're also going to talk about what divorce attorneys should be educated about when it comes to this. So we'll be right back. One of the things I remember very clearly about turning 50 was getting my AARP card in the mail. Part of me was shocked and sad that I was old enough to become a member. But since I've moved through my 50s, I have come to realize how wonderful the organization is supporting men and women in their 50s and above. So when I heard about the National Association for Single and Divorced Families, the NASDF, I had those same feelings. It's really hard to be a single or divorced parent, but this is an organization that wants to support you and your well-being by offering discounted products and services. There are so many benefits to being a member of the NASDF, such as free 24-hour nurse helpline, discounts on diapers, formula, medical supplies. There are so many wonderful benefits to the NASDF. So if you want to learn more and become a member, visit nasdf.org. I also want to tell you about a wonderful therapist out of Chicago and the North Shore. Her name is Julie Walton. She's an LCPC, and Julie has been a therapist for many, many, many years, maybe decades. Julie is so wonderful. She's committed to supporting individuals, couples, and families in navigating divorce and complex issues. Julie is also a divorce mediator. She's a trained divorce mediator, so she completely understands what's going on during your divorce and the decisions that you're having to make. If you want to learn more, you can find Julie at northshorereach.com. Welcome back to the Divorced Girl Smiling podcast. My name is Jackie Pilosoff, and I'm your host. And today we're talking about the difference between sobriety and recovery. My guest is Chris Beck, Vice President of Business Development for Family Law at SoberLink. For those of you who don't know what SoberLink is, it is this amazing device. It's a monitoring device that you can get court ordered or just ask your spouse to use so that they can blow into it and prove to you that they're not drinking around your kids. I love it. And if you are interested and want to learn more, go to soberlink.com/DGS and you get $50 off your device. Moving on to detox and support systems. So, Dr. Gordon explains that detox is about preventing the body from going into shock and preparing the individual to engage in meaningful recovery work. However, detox alone is insufficient. People need long term support, such as outpatient or inpatient rehabilitation, which you mentioned, Chris, therapy, and peer groups like Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, Chris, in my opinion, they also need SoberLink at that time because what it's going to do is keep the person accountable to themselves and others that they're making progress, right?
I agree. Yes, it's a great tool to reinforce, that they are staying sober, but also to reinforce that, hey, my co-parent is staying on the right path, and I know and I can trust the results. So I'm starting to earn some of the trust back that, you know, I I'm encouraging that person to get back to a healthy way of leading their lives. So making sure that we're seeing what's happening in front of us, and you know, those results mean a lot. When I see a test that is compliant, I know that my co-parent is parenting in a great environment, something that I can be proud of for that parent.
I just love that. Let's talk about a few features of SoberLink. Okay, so it's discreet, it's portable, it's a professional grade breathalyzer, zero wait time, data at a glance. So it uses AI to organize and display the test results, either green, yellow, or red. Green means compliant, yellow means missed the test, like didn't even take the test, red, non compliant. Know that the right person's testing. So there's a built in camera and no room for cheating. Anything I'm missing? This is pretty good stuff.
No, I think you kind of nailed all the right points. We have two different levels that we offer. We offer a level one that's designed around testing around parenting time only, and then we have a level two program that's designed around a schedule of testing. So you're scheduling testing 7 days a week, and usually you're doing it 2 to 4 times per day, somewhere in between that.
Okay, now the level 2 one would make sense for somebody who's in recovery, who has admitted having a problem, right? What wh what other scenarios would you want the level 2 for?
No, Jackie, you hit the nail on the head right there. Our level two program is more of our treatment program. It was how our treatment side of our process works, where they're doing testing on a schedule. On average, it's 3 times a day, but I've seen some that go to two, some that go to four, depending on the risk level. But that's exactly how it works. And we're trying to maintain their sobriety during the entire day, and they're getting reinforced each and every day by showing compliant behavior to their ex. And that's a great way to do it, and their ex becomes part of their, recovery circle, when they're trying to get through the process of recovery.
I just love this. Okay, let's move on to divorce lawyers. What can they do to help make people, um well, I mean, they can't make anybody do anything, but what can they do to help families in the best possible way who's in this situation?
I think they just gotta lead with compassion. I think that's the biggest thing that is the takeaway here for professionals is that they can't get caught up in, whether someone's, their client's struggles or the other party's struggles. They have to be compassionate about what's happening and set up process to succeed. And really, that's with working with the right people, making sure you have the right technologies in place like SoberLink, all in an effort to keep that kiddo safe, but also help that other parent who is struggling to succeed. And that's really what's important.
And I think that you need compassion even if you're the ex who isn't drinking. So I know it's really hard. There's probably people listening to this. I would think you're listening if this is an issue for you, if you're wondering whether your spouse has an issue or not with alcohol, if he's an alcoholic or not, or she. But it's really important to try to be compassionate, even though you might have a lot of anger, resentment, fear, bitterness toward the person, don't want your kid around them, and realize that this is so much more out of their control than you realize. And there's a really good group called Al-Anon, which is for families of alcoholics to go to learn how to be more compassionate and understanding because everybody really wants the same thing, don't they, Chris? They want the person who's drinking to not drink anymore. The person probably wants it, the family wants it, it's better for the kids. So try to put your feelings of resentment aside and realize like it's an illness. It's not that the person's trying to be a bad person or a bad parent and drink with the kids around. The person cannot control it. And if you have that mentality, it doesn't mean you're forgiving them or you're condoning the drinking and saying it's okay. It's not okay. But if you have compassion, it will help you get through it more. Do you find that, Chris?
You're absolutely right. Yeah. If we can work together collaboratively, the two parties, I think you're definitely on your way to success.
A couple more things from Dr. Gordon is that he says recovery is not a linear process. Setbacks are a natural part of the journey. Well, that's frustrating, but good to know. And he says that even with high quality detox and rehab programs, 30 to 40% of individuals may relapse within a year, which underscores the need for ongoing support and a compassionate understanding of the challenges involved. Wow.
That's absolutely right. Now they even use the term return to use. Instead of relapse. They didn't want they wanted to get rid of that negative connotation of relapse, and the return to use is just a more accepted term even now. So how things have changed, right?
Well, I don't buy that. It is what it is. Relapse, return to use. And I just wish for the kids, for the other parent who's not the drinker, and for the drinker, companies like SoberLink are here to help and support. And SoberLink has only been around since 2009.
Yeah, well, we started in 2011.
Oh,
Like families. Yep.
Okay, 2011. So I don't mean only, that's a good track record, but think back to all the families who didn't have access to this before 2011. This is a gift. SoberLink is a gift and a way to help keep kids safe, facilitate recovery, and catch relapses or return to use.
That's right. Absolutely. And we try and keep it positive, everything that we do, and we hope that we can support these families because at the end of the day, that's really what we're here for.
What a wonderful, wonderful service. Chris, thank you so much for being on the podcast and taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you, Jackie. It's great being on your show always.
And I want to tell my listeners, if you want to learn more about SoberLink, go to soberlink.com/DGS for Divorce Girl Smiling because you get $50 off your device. And if you want to listen to more podcasts, read articles, or sign up for my free consult, which is a 30-minute meeting with me where you can tell me all your stories and issues and what's on your mind and what you need and what your goals are. And I will connect you to the best resources to help you get a great divorce outcome and have an experience that maybe will take a lot of stress away from you. So, thank you so much for listening, everyone, and we'll talk to you real soon.